All right, so now that we've got the environment light under control, we'll bring it back on later. For now, let's go back to just using the direct light while we talk about, I keep calling it the direct light, the distant light. I think direct light is from Maya. I'm not sure. Anyway, I said I got rid of this before, and I guess I didn't. Let's kill it now. We're gonna use the Pyro shader, and let's assign it to our thing here. You can just click and drag it to that, or you can bring it up here. The Pyro shader, so we're in Houdini 15 right now, as of the time of this recording. If you were using Houdini 14 right now, stop this lesson and go download Houdini 15 because they finally really cleaned up the Pyro shader. I mean, it's still not. It's probably still a little more cumbersome than it needs to be, but it's definitely better now than it was. There used to be a million things everywhere, and there still are a million things you can change, but at least they're hidden underneath stuff now. It's not overwhelming the way it used to be. It also just seems to work better now. Anyway, so the Pyro shader. We're not going to get into obviously the fire stuff because we haven't talked about combustion yet. That will be in a lesson coming soon. But in any case, in the meantime, there's still plenty that we can do with this. Straight off the bat, there's stuff in here like the density scale, which you'll remember from even in the billowy smoke shader that we used in the last lesson just to get our renders out at all. This will take the values that were being read in, and we're losing the color now also because we're going back to a gray world of just that distant light. We're not getting the color from the ENV anymore. But so there you go. So you get the idea. So now it's much more dense. I'm not going to wait for the full renders anymore because I'm just going to show you in areas on here quickly. So this is it at 2, and then this is it at 1. You can definitely feel a huge difference. You'll particularly see that difference along the edges oftentimes, and absolutely in the alpha. So this was 2, and this is 1. So it's gonna feel different in here. The light is gonna pass through a difference, so the shadows are gonna feel much more sharp with the higher density than without it. We can control the shadows separately if we want, and these are getting done in 37 seconds, which is pretty good. So here we are in the smoke brightness. Okay, so here we are, shadow density. Sometimes it can be nice. I mean, you don't usually want to decouple this from the actual smoke density. This number is being multiplied by that, so by putting 0.5, if I had the density rather at 2, well then this being at 0.5 means that ultimately the shadows will treat the volume at the density that it already was, because 2 times 0.5 is just 1. So you'll see. Well, I'll just render it. Why not? Why keep talking about it when I can just render it? It can be nice. I find it rarely pays off to lower the shadow density while keeping the density where it is. But a lot of times, if you needed to make everything much wispier, maybe if I needed to have you got some notes and it's like, oh, it's too dense, bring it down. Sometimes it can be fun to make it really low density and really high shadow. That's kind of a cool art-directed way of still giving shape, still being able to see shapes in your volumes, even though they're now much lighter. I don't really know how that would ever actually play out in the real world, but now we have a much more feathery smoke than, let's say, here before, where it was much thicker, obviously. But we still have you can still pick out all these features, but because watch what happens if I put it back to 1, which would be accurate. it's just not going to, depending on what the situation calls for. I mean, you should probably do this by default, but I've definitely run into situations. See how boring this is now? It might be more accurate, but a lot of times it's not about what's more accurate. We'll get some detail from the compositing from the alpha, as I keep pointing out, but that sometimes it can be great to have that extra shape in there. So that's just where a lot of the art comes into it. Keep it at 1 for the most part, but just so you know that's there. So one thing that I particularly wanted to do, and I'm going to basically delete this one, and I'm going to delete this one too. We had all this muddy stuff here. We can play around with that. If you see, like, use lookup ramp, we can remap those values. So I can say, like, all these values that were pretty low in the first place, maybe just really crush them and bring out the ones that are higher more. So I can draw this kind of like, maybe like this kind of S curve, something like that. Yeah. The idea here being that all of those low values, maybe we just lose them or further suppress them anyway down to a lower amount. So maybe we'll lose some of the muddiness and gain some of the detail back. So there you go. So this is kind of compared to like these images before, where we had all this muddiness, and now, oops, it's peeled back a lot of it to reveal that detail. That can be desirable or not desirable. I mean, all of this shader manipulation stuff is really just to get an art-directed look. If somebody said this is too soupy, it's too generic, and this is like, oh, now you're really feeling these shapes. For the millionth time, I'll stress, we would have lost a lot of it anyway, or at least it would have been downplayed by losing it because of the low alpha there. It would have been, when it gets composited over another image, the alpha is determining how that's blended. That said, this is definitely bringing out sharper features anyway. So you're just going to get a much more, in this case, this looks like a thicker smoke. More of actually a kind of a cloud look to it. So that is one of many things you can do in the Pyro shader. You can remap the whole range here, or you can say, oh, well, from 0 to 1 should really be from 10 to 100. Maybe it's supposed to be crazy all the time. Again, we're not going to talk fire. We're not going to talking about anything like that. The other main thing I wanted to mention on here is finally this rest business. And for this, actually, I'm going to put this back to where it was. The rest noise is really critical, like super, super, super critical in terms of how you use this. So just straight off the bat, I'm gonna take a second here to get back to where we were. Let's see, do we have a render? I'm just gonna kill all these. Let me render another one and I'll rejoin you in 1 second.